Good morning and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Thursday, June 15th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have an agenda before us that has been jiggled a little bit. So what is item 7 on the agenda will become item 8, and item 8 will become item 7. Do-si-do. Are there any other amendments that we need to our agenda today? Staff?
Yeah, just noting, Chair, too, that between item 7 and 8, that we will be going in camera in between those two as well.
Yes. Beg pardon, we will be going in camera at that point, and then returning for item 8 to the regular meeting. So do I have a motion to approve that agenda? Moved, seconded, all in favor? And we have an agenda. Thank you very much. Very first thing up is item number 1, Roberts Creek Community Hall, Masonic Hall Property Line Adjustment Proposal. And over to staff.
Good morning, committee. Bringing forward a report this morning on behalf of Manager of Planning Jonathan Jackson. This report is in response to a board directive from 2021 made to instruct staff to investigate if SCRD had an ability to assist the Roberts Creek Community Association with reconciling a property line conflict and create terms amenable to the Masonic Society to facilitate a property line adjustment. Roberts Creek Park land is owned by SCRD, which is immediately adjacent to Roberts Creek Hall and the Masonic Society property. Roberts Creek Parkland was purchased using SCRD Park Dedication Reserve funds, making it a regional asset. As such, the legislative requirements to consider disposition of any portion of these lands must include a regional vote of the electorate. Disposing of parkland has inherent land use and policy questions that are best considered through OCP renewal. As a result of the research that staff have conducted, our recommendation is not to proceed with further exploration of the land swap at this time, but rather to include this area's long-term land use considerations in the OCP renewal project. Thank you.
Thank you. And do directors have any questions? Director Bax.
Not so many questions as a statement that I understand that this is a complex issue and involves numerous parties. I'm going to continue to dialogue with involved members. I know that the community association and the community association has some work to do, and they're pursuing that. And I'm going to be looking into various ways that we can use this, that our community can improve this valuable piece of land that is in parks through various means that I'm exploring. And I want my community to know that this isn't the end of this conversation.
Lovely. Does anybody have a motion? Director Lee.
I believe the appropriate motion is to accept the recommendations as presented on page 3.
Seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That passes. We are whizzing through our agenda. Item number 2, development variance permit for 1246 Point Road. Over to staff.
Thank you. Bringing forward a report this morning on behalf of Alana Whitman, Planner 2, who is absent this week. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the minimum building setback from a parcel line adjacent to a road to facilitate the retention and completion of a partially constructed auxiliary building that was started without the required permits. The proposal is reasonable given the parcel size and characteristics and Moti's approval of a setback permit within the Moti right-of-way setback. Notifications were mailed to properties within 50 meters per the statutory requirements on this application. One comment was received by the Hopkins Landing Heritage Path Society, who stated they had no objections to this application and support its approval by SCRD. Staff have evaluated the proposal based on the board's DVP policy and recommend issuance of the permit. The property owner, Mr. Letham, is in attendance today, and staff are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Stamford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move this recommendation, but I have a quick question. Is there anything in this variance that has an impact, a negative impact, on drainage around the road in this area? Because this is such a challenging area for all kinds of drainage. So I just wondered if you see any impact to drainage by this variance.
Thank you very much for the question. Staff are not aware right now of any impacts to drainage.
Thank you. I would like to move the motion as presented.
And I see a seconder. So that is the motion as presented on page 8. Any further discussion? Seeing none, calling the question. All in favor? Oh, Director Box.
I just have a question about why we're here. So I'm looking at the photograph, and it looks like this piece of construction is under 10 square meters. Is that correct?
It's just slightly bigger.
Slightly bigger. Okay, so that's why we're here.
Yeah, it's 133.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to know. Thank you.
Yes, that could not be heard in the meeting, and that was the property owner saying that it was 132, although we shouldn't be questioning the gallery. So if there are no further questions from anyone, I would like to call the question on just a minute, over to staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a point of process order. I believe that the chair has a script for DVPs to ask for comment in the room, please. At this time, the committee could call for comment in the room, whether there's any comments from the gallery on the application.
Yes,
Thank
sorry about that, but I don't have the DVP script, but if there is anybody in the real or the virtual gallery who would like to comment on this application, go to the mic if you're in the room, and if you are in the virtual gallery, you need to put your hand up. I am not seeing any hands up, real or virtual. So if we can now move on to a vote on the recommendations on page 8, all in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. Sorry for the lack of script, but I should have brought it with me. All right. Next item up. Item 4 on our agenda is proposed ALR exclusion for 508 Pratt Road in Elphinstone. Over to staff.
Yes, good morning. The SCRD received this referral from the Agricultural Land Commission regarding an application seeking exclusion of a 9.75 acre parcel at 508 Pratt Road in Electoral Area E, Elphinstone. The applicant is seeking exclusion from the Agricultural Land Reserve in order to facilitate a two-phase development. The first phase would propose short-term rental of the existing home and 9 manufactured homes. The second phase would propose an eventual residential subdivision and mixed-use area. Staff have evaluated this application based on conformance with the Sunshine Coast Regional District Agricultural Area Plan, Elphinstone Official Community Plan, and Zoning Bylaw 722. The applicant's proposal is contrary to policies and regulations set out in these documents and does not support agriculture. As such, staff recommend that the application be denied, and staff are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And before we go any further, I'm going to say that I would like to refer this to my APC. I have a new APC. They are interested in looking at these kind of applications, and there doesn't seem to be any pressing time constraints associated with this particular item. But are there any other questions, or is the, just a minute, Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm searching for my virtual hand here, but the real one worked quite well. I was just wondering if we could ask staff if they knew of any urgent time constraints to this decision.
Over to staff.
Thank you very much for the question. Time constraints here relate to staff time overall. So I'll say referring to the APC is possible if the board wishes. However, staff have recommended not referring to the APC as the proposal has significant conflicts with SERD policy. As we know, APC referrals take considerable time for staff and APC members, and staff felt the level of policy conflict did not warrant further review and have recommended declining the application at this time.
Thank you, Chair.
Director Bax.
I just wanted to know if the applicant is listening or in the room.
We generally go to the applicant after we go to the board, do we not? We really need to put these scripts here at the chair table so that we have them available in these cases. So I will now ask if there is anyone associated with this application, either here in the real room or in the virtual room. Now is the time to raise your hand. I am not seeing any real or virtual hands. So, is there any further questions or discussions from directors? I am going to move that this be referred to the APC with apologies to staff, but we need an agenda for this month. And we have a meeting coming up in less than 2 weeks. So hopefully this will be a pretty quick turnaround. Is there a seconder? That's seconded. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I do realize this might prove to be a little expensive, but I think the value to our APCs to look at stuff like this and get it in the minutes is good value. I do appreciate the staff's comments, and perhaps once we get one or two like this, we'll just forge ahead after this. So thank you. I am in favor of referring it.
Thank you. And I have a largely new APC who haven't had the opportunity to do very much yet because we haven't had a lot of APC meetings. So they appreciate learning the ropes. And anyway, so that is a motion on the table and it's seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. Would you like that recorded? Thank you very much. So that passes. It's option 2 to refer to Area E APC. Next item on the agenda is Recreation Sites and Trails BC Partnership Agreement renewals, Secret Cove Falls, Home Site Creek, Big Tree, and Sprockets recreation sites. Over to our Parks and Recreation staff.
No, thank you. This staff report is related to the renewal of the Rec Sites and Trails BC and SARD partnership agreement for the stewardship and ongoing maintenance of Seaver Cove Falls Homesite Creek Recreation Area. The province of BC owns these recreation sites, and the renewal of this partnership agreement is a reflection of the continued relationship building between Rec Sites and Trails BC and the SARD for the management and maintenance of these 3 Sunshine Coast recreation sites. And this partnership agreement renewal will allow for the continued enjoyment, appreciation, and protection of these regionally significant natural assets. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And do we have any questions? Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I must say I'm very thrilled to see the community association stepping up and doing this work. And I just had to say thank you to them. It helps everybody on the coast so we can even have more, afford more of these kind of things. So it's the right thing, and I believe it's the right people, otherwise staff would tell us it wasn't. And so unless they have any comments other than that, yes.
Thank you, through the chair. I believe Director Lee's comments are probably more reflective of the next report on the agenda. This particular report is related to the agreement that the SCRD holds with RSTBC. But then we do get to the next agenda, which is around partnership agreements. So I agree with you. I just wanted to make sure that we kept those comments in order. Thank you.
Thank you. All excited.
Jumping the gun, but fair enough. So am I seeing a motion for the recommendations? Director Gabius?
Yes, I'm very happy to move recommendations on page 21.
And a seconder? Seconded. Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments? All right, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. Next up is the partnership agreements with Half Moon Bay Community Association and, well, that is for Half Moon Bay Community Association for all of those sites. Over to staff.
Yes, thank you. Similarly related to the previous report is the renewal of the Sunshine Coast Regional District and Half Moon Bay Community Association partnership agreement for the stewardship and maintenance of Secret Cove Falls Homesite Creek Recreation Area, which we just previously discussed, and also the establishment of a new SCRD Half Moon Bay Community Association partnership agreement for Welcome Woods Wilderness Park and Wood Bay Heights Park. Again, these partnership agreements are a reflection of the continued engagement and relationship building between SCRD parks and community organizations for the stewardship and maintenance of SCRD parks. This allows for more frequent eyes and ears in these areas and also helps identify and respond to issues more quickly and offers a higher level of service than what is provided currently by SCRD parks. Thank you again, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I do have one question, which is where are we at with sprockets? Because that isn't on today's agenda. Have we seen that already, or is it coming on a future agenda?
Thank you. Sprockets was contained in the previous report, the renewal of the SCRD and Rec Sites and Trails BC partnership agreement. It's for Homesite Creek, Big Tree, and Sprockets. Thank you.
Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I will echo Director Lee's comments. This group of volunteers is amazing. I can attest to that. I use the trails. They are so well maintained. They do amazing work. And it's well appreciated in the community. So I am happy to move recommendations on page 25.
Thank you. And I see a seconder. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. We have now leaped forward to item number 7. No, Yes, item number 7, erstwhile item number 8, which is the minutes from the Area F APC. And are there any matters arising from those minutes that any Director Stanford?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a comment. If directors have had a chance to read those minutes and note the deep dive that this new APC is taking into potential subdivisions and the ideas that they're coming up with that we hope to see incorporated into subdivisions in the future to help mitigate some of the issues that Area F specifically and the Sunshine Coast as a whole is facing. So I was really impressed with the level of conversation and ideas that came out of this. So thank you.
Thank you. I too noted that those were some interesting comments, and I will be referring to them when the matter comes to us. Seeing no further questions or comments, we are then going to move in camera for the next few minutes under, and here's the motion, that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91 G and I of the Community Charter. Do I have a motion to go in camera? Moved, seconded, all in favor? All right, we are going to go in camera. We'll resume in a couple of minutes. Good morning and welcome back to the Electoral Area Services Committee agenda of Thursday, June 15th, 2023. And for once, we are not immediately adjourning after coming back from in camera. We are actually going to continue the meeting. The next item on our agenda is Hopkins Landing Port results from major inspection. And over to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the fall of 2022, the SCRD engaged an engineer to conduct major inspections for 5 of the 9 SCRD ports, including Hopkins Landing. The scope of the inspection included above and below water and was followed by a site-specific condition assessment report. The report included health and safety considerations and load-rated capacities for the overall structure, as well as residual life estimates for individual members of the dock. The last time a major inspection, both substructure and underwater, was conducted for Hopkins was in 2014. The condition assessment report for Hopkins Landing was received in April of this year and identified that the port was no longer in serviceable condition. Assessment results indicated that the major upgrades were required at the facility and that it is currently structurally unreliable for public assembly. The report specifically recommends that due to the condition of the fixed structure and the number of repairs required, that the facility be closed to the public until upgrades can be completed. Staff acknowledge that the port is used by the community, nearby island residents, visitors, and other organizations. Hopkins Landing plays an important role in the culture and identity and history of the Hopkins area and the Howe Sound community. Temporary closure of the port will create a hardship for many and represents the loss of a valuable and well-loved community gathering place. That being said, the SCRD has an obligation to respond to this identified risk in a timely and appropriate manner. Knowing how important the dock is for the community, staff have recommended immediate action be taken to undertake the necessary repairs to reopen the dock safely. We are unsure how long this will take. Knowing nature of this work requires professionals, permits, environmental considerations, but we have identified it as a priority, including requesting additional staffing hours to focus on this project. Both myself and Kelly Cooper, our capital project coordinator for ports, are available to answer questions that the committee might have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to have one question before we go in. Where are we with our ports plan for all of our docks and ports?
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming you mean our capital asset renewal planning? Thank you. So we have 5 of our ports done. We have 4 remaining ports that need their major inspections. As the board will recall, we approved some additional funding to complete those major inspections this year. So I assume similar timing to these past number of assessments, in that a report will be received by year end or into Q1 of 2024. And then staff will need time to assess those reports, but ongoing work is being done on the capital plan for the ports that we have. We'll add the remaining 4 next year, and staff hope to be back in front of the board by fall of 2024 with a ports capital asset renewal plan for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Bax.
So I like the language behind this. It's timely and appropriate. However, the being unsure of how long is a bit of a question. So are the next steps after, should we approve this, to send it off to tender and then award the contract and then the work will begin? Is that kind of what's going to happen?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, you are correct. This is new territory for us in terms of this major overhaul. So we will need to engage the services of a professional to look at the report that we have. It's very specific with individual members, pieces of the port, and their recommendations in terms of what requires immediate replacement related to this safety and structural issue. They'll have to look at that. We'll have to have detailed design drawings completed. We'll have to get permits. There are environmental concerns because we have sensitive eelgrass in the area. So all of that will be part of the project. And then eventually we'll have to go to tender to get the construction done. So it is a process. That part of the process in terms of the tendering for the professional consultant is we do that all the time. It's the environmental and the marine considerations that we're not sure what we may or may not discover or what requirements will be placed on us for this work, which is why I'm unable to provide a time estimate. But again, identified as a priority, and we will get it moving as quickly as we can.
Director Stanford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And with your indulgence, I have a statement. It's about 3 minutes long, and I have some questions. As you know, I've sent you packages of letters of support for the Hopkins Landing dock. There was a very short turnaround, so most of those responses are from people that live around Hopkins. It's much more challenging to get similar statements from islanders who use this dock, primarily because they are off the grid. They're not on our road system. They're just more challenged. So I would like to provide the perspective from the islands. Over the last couple of weeks, I've learned a huge amount about Hopkins Landing Wharf, how it defines a historical neighborhood on the Sunshine Coast, how it continues to be an accessible point to the marine environment for people of all ages and lifestyles and abilities. We have read the numerous letters and messages about the place Hopkins has in our community and in the Sunshine Coast heritage at large. I have a unique perspective as an islander to detail the challenges we face as a water access only community and the importance that Hopkins has for residents of Gambier and Keats. The Stormaway is regulated through Transport Canada and has significant restrictions on what it can carry via Langdale Terminal. All hazardous materials and machinery such as vehicle gas, barbecue propane tanks, engines, and chainsaws must come by private boat. The Stormaway cannot fit bulky items as animal feed, construction tools, or fencing, basic day-to-day items we all transport at one time or another. Hopkins is the most practical point to unload from a vehicle to a private vessel, as there's no moorage at the terminal float in Langdale where you can actually wait and hold your boat. Many full-time residents moor their boat temporarily at Hopkins and retrieve their vehicle from Langdale, which has yearly paid parking for islanders. The whole docking area for the Stormaway at Langdale Terminal is locked off and inaccessible at night. When a neighbor of mine had a stroke a few years ago, the fastest route in the early morning hours was a private vessel to Hopkins, where an ambulance was waiting rather than tracking down terminal security. This is not an unusual occurrence. The Stormaway and other water taxis use the Hopkins dock when the terminal is off limits. This has happened due to strike action on the terminal, or, for instance, when the ferry hit the external dolphin by accident a few years ago. This is a very viable plan B for emergencies on the coast, which isn't available in many areas. And we have mentioned that that is a challenge on the coast. Emergency transport or alternate routes due to fire or floods is not available everywhere. This is one of the roles that Hopkins plays. And it goes both ways. Hopkins is a viable evacuation point for the Sunshine Coast, and I've heard it's used for transport of medical waste off the coast for incineration in Vancouver. This facility is the primary access point for vital tradespeople and for dozens of island residents who do not live on the road system. One couple have used Hopkins exclusively for 50 years, and even closing it temporarily may mean the end of their ability to live on Gambier. It's a travesty that local and regional communities have been left to finance critical pieces of transportation infrastructure that are exponentially more and more expensive to maintain as the years go on. But communities have grown up around these structures over the past 100 years and have come to absolutely rely on them to the point where they define their identity. We should not be in this untenable position, and down the line, I absolutely support reviewing these structures to ensure they're best able to represent modern needs in a changing environment. But for now, the Hopkins Landing needs to be fixed to a minimum to allow for continued basic ingress and egress for all members of the Sunshine Coast. Thank you.
Okay, I'm coming in at this. I am in the ports function despite having no ports, and as is Area D. And although I am in the function because we are a ferry-dependent community, so we understand the importance of marine infrastructure, but we have 9 ports, and we may end up with 10 if we end up taking on New Brighton. And that's a lot of ports, and they're very expensive. And we're in an era of climate change. The dock at Grantham's a few years ago was knocked to flinders by storm-thrown logs. And that's becoming even more of a problem. You know, it's a double whammy between increasingly severe storms and the fact that industry has not cleaned up their industrial waste, AKA logs, from the shorelines, which they actually said they were going to do back in the day. So we are left in a really challenging situation. And it may be that we need to redesign these wharves that were originally designed for Union steamships to meet the challenges of a changing climate and changing transportation modes. So I'm looking forward to the port's master plan because that's when we're going to have this conversation. And to pour $500,000 into one of 9 ports at this point, I'm really struggling with. And so I guess one of my questions to staff is, are there repairs that could be made on a temporary basis that would be less than $500,000 to open the dock for a couple of years until we can get our ports strategy together and evaluate the situation and prioritize which of these ports should be addressed first.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. I will answer the first part of the question, and then I'll have to seek your indulgence in repeating the second part of the question. So the report from the engineer provides residual life estimates for the individual members of the port for the next 5 to 10 years. And what is in front of you today are the considerations that are directly related to the structural and safety requirement repairs to open or to keep the port open. It's not about the rest of the repairs that need to be done or things that aren't critical. The only piece of the budget that's in front of you that is potentially debatable is whether or not the dolphins are removed, but that is a very small value of the total value that's in front of you. Redesigning the port, is that an option? Potentially, how much time would that take? That's where I begin to feel a little uncomfortable in terms of whether we go down that right now or whether we address the immediate issue at hand. Certainly, part of the conversation with the engineer could be considerations for future, and I would never, we don't want to disregard that, but that's a conversation that we need to have when we engage the engineer. But the focus would be on getting that port back open safely for the public. And in terms of your second question, I just caught the end piece, which is the most important. So could you please repeat the question?
No, that was just when we come to our ports master plan, capital master plan, then as part of that, presumably, we will prioritize the ports. But at this time, we don't have prioritization. We don't have a plan. We are tackling these on pretty much a one-off basis, is my impression. And that makes me pretty uncomfortable when I add up the millions of dollars that we're looking at here. Okay, Director Stanford, is your hand still up or up again? It's up again. It's up again. Director Stanford.
So I did have some questions. Because the dolphins, even though they're a small part of this, they are an important part. Are they made, do you know if they've got the creosote covering that the rest of the pylons have?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you. And on behalf of the community, I have two quick questions. The definition of public assembly has caused quite a bit of confusion. If the dock is closed, that is beside the point, but there was a lot of confusion as to what that means, whether one person can walk on the dock, or 10, or 3. And then finally, you've answered some of my questions here. Just a clarification that this plan is the absolute minimum required to open this dock safely. Those are the kinds of questions I'm getting from the community. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. I understand the word public assembly causes challenges. It challenged myself. But I think the key point is that there is a recommendation in the report that says, due to the condition of the fixed structure and the number of repairs required, it is recommended the facility be closed to public use until upgrades can be completed. And I think I know that's all I need to know. I think that's fairly clear. In terms of is this the absolute minimum? Again, my understanding, and when reading the report, I have repairs in addition to what is in front of you today to be considered over the next 5 years. But what is in front of you today is directly related to those individual items that have failed and are structurally unsound. We will explore with the professional that we engage to do the design around what we need, and if there's cost savings and things that don't have to be done, of course that would be considered at the time. But we have an engineer's report in front of us with a cost estimate that is directly related. Thank you.
Director Bax.
Yeah, I understand the issue here is for a community to lose its access to this very important artery, and that it's a shame that we haven't discussed this earlier, so we could create some type of temporary fix while we go through the elongated process to do the more permanent fixes. I would hope that we could do something in the short term to get the dock operational and safe while we put out requests for tenders to do the work. But it's my understanding from conversations with staff that our hands are tied here. We are under legal obligation to follow the recommendations of staff, and we have consulted with the insurance companies, and we've consulted with our legal department, and that making a decision outside of what's been recommended here would be a mistake. It is regrettable that the condition of the dock is as it is, but I'm struggling to find another way around it. I wish there was some other way to have the dock accessible to the public that desperately needs it, while we search for a more long-term solution. But I can't see a way to do that unless somebody else has an idea on how to do that.
So I'm just a clarifying question. Given the complexity of the situation and the fact that it's already June, I think we could fairly say that there is no chance of having the dock open again in 2024. Would that be a reasonable guess?
Through the chair, I think you meant 2023. Yeah, no worries. Well, what I can tell you is procurement is 2 to 3 months, because again, we have processes we have to follow. But the unknown for me is really when we get into permitting and all the permissions that we require, how long those will take, I don't know. And all I can commit to, and I think as evidenced by what staff have put forward in the report today for specific resources, is that we would make it a priority so that it stays at the top of our pile and that someone is concentrating on trying to move this forward as quickly as we can.
And just as a follow-up, I suspect that the window for major repairs on marine facilities is mostly in the summer? Would that be a fair guess?
Through the chair, there's lots of considerations in terms of the window of opportunity for repairs. So we'll have to take into consideration, and that will be a professional opinion for those that we hire as to when that work can occur.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to ask a difficult question, but I hope there is an answer to it. It seems to me there should have been 5 items here, and the 5th is the one that I believe all directors should be voting on, and that is to close the port until it's proven safe. This is a financial risk to the corporation, and that should be. Can that be answered?
That should be recommendation number 2, closing the port.
Because it's listed as a financial, it's only the people in the service that get to vote on it. So I have no vote on this. And it makes me uncomfortable.
Oh dear, yes. It is a voting question, so over to staff. Yeah, that's actually a good question. If we tease apart the items 1 through 4, we get into, yes. I'll let staff struggle with that one.
Yeah, no struggle, Chair. So essentially, this is a couple parts. You're also amending the financial plan. There is a risk to the organization. Typically, I believe your procedural bylaw says, in the case of a committee, this would be the service participants, and then in the board, it would likely be a weighted vote because it's a financial plan amendment and potentially a risk to the organization. So it would be in the board's purview to then have the entire board approving those particular minutes, including the other board members, not just the Electoral Area Services Committee.
So follow-up question, there's nothing about a proposed allocation of gas tax funds from the various areas. So that gets us into discussing which areas would pay and how much, which is a potentially challenging discussion.
If you mean in the context of really changing the past practice, I would agree. I think from the staff's perspective, we have an agreement that with for the community works funds, they're no longer called gas tax, that is, really strongly advising that funds be spent and allocated. So we're looking to every opportunity where there's appropriate projects that apply, and it's for consideration. So there'll likely be more discussion to that effect, but again, we're just putting it forward as a consideration. We know that the practice too has been where the asset has derived, that there's a recommendation to take it from that local electoral areas pot of the funds that's been allocated, but we're just again putting something in front of you for consideration, knowing that Area F's been pretty fully committed to other projects, but other areas have a significant amount that is not allocated that needs to be before 2024.
And I'm going to follow that up again because I have been asking repeatedly about the Community Works Fund and have been assured that we did not need to allocate them by 2024, that the funds will not disappear, that they will remain with us. We've had difficulty allocating them, which is a whole other discussion. But the question remains, how would we share the cost? Would it be on a per capita basis? Would it be an equal contribution from each area? Would we have a conversation that says, well, I'll kick in 10,000 if you kick in 10,000? Like, what would be the allocation from the various areas for this project?
So, in my recollection to the report, what was proposed and is on page 34, it shows that essentially what is being recommended is for the service participants to contribute up to the amount that Area F has available, uncommitted, of a combined total of 353, 266. So it's just recommending a flat contribution, not a per capita, because the per capita is really difficult to, even though that's how it's allocated from Community Works, I know that they don't believe that that's what they, it's not what they see as in the intent of how projects are funded. But again, that's for conversations of a different day. So we just said the floor for each area was 88,000 based on what's left with Area F. So.
Okay, finally I got it. Is that you're recommending that B, D, E, and F each contribute 88,000. Okay, I wasn't clear from reading the report that that's what you meant. I'm really on the horns of a dilemma here. I mean, I can see we have no choice about temporarily closing the port. That's uncontestable. And it seems to me it's very unlikely that we would get it open again in 2023, no matter how much money we pour at it at this point. And that loses the summer window that people really value for this facility. And now we're facing a $500,000 Band-Aid with unknown further costs down the road. It's pretty scary when we've got 8 more of these coming at us. So I'm dilemmaed. Director Bax.
I just have a question about my uncommitted CWF funds for 2023. It shows that I have $1,491,391. And I've committed $500,000 to repair the part of Lower Road that is sinking. Has that been removed from this financial figure? Yes? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Director Stanford.
Yeah, I do really recognize the difficulty that this decision puts before us, because it's looking at the immediate versus the long term. I can't emphasize how important these structures are. If it was Roberts Creek Pier on the table, if it was Cooper's Green, and I'm not talking about just the building, the whole park. This is the kind of questions we're looking at. There's some big decisions that have to come down in the long term. The very first decision I made on this board was $840,000 for a sprinkler system at a swimming pool, with some risk involved because we weren't sure what was going to happen afterwards. It is difficult, but this is really important to the communities and to Howe Sound and to Sunshine Coast as a whole. We need, in the long term, we need to advocate for better support for these critical transportation infrastructure pieces. But right now, this needs to be fixed. Thanks.
Director Bax.
Well, nobody else seems to want to do it, so I will move for the that we accept the recommendations as they appear on page 32.
Is there a seconder? There is a seconder. There's 4 of us. I'm really struggling with this, I'm sorry. It's hard because of all the expenses. The SCRD has taken on so many services over the years, and we are now facing huge costs associated with these services. And we have not done our strategic plan. We have not set priorities on how we will spend money. I have money obviously sitting in my fund, and if it has to be allocated, my number one, outside of other things that we have been looking at, you know, the number one priority is water. It has to be. So over to Director Lee, who does not have to vote on this, lucky fellow.
I'm afraid that we have similar decisions up and down the entire coast, including, I notice, Davis Bay Pier, when it was rebuilt for even less reasons than this, from beloved to the community. We have one in Madeira Park that's the same way, and it's a dilemma facing everybody. But my question, of course, is there a chance that we could get a government grant for this one? Is there any way that once we launch on this, we could still get a grant? Or would they consider the existing grants we got what we have to spend first?
Over to staff.
We will most certainly keep an eye out for anything that may qualify. For instance, some of the projects you just referenced were specific grants that funded those particular projects, as well as community fundraising. So we will most certainly do that. Typically most grants, you can't spend any money or nothing's eligible prior to either applying or approval of the grant. So those would be some considerations that we'd take into account, as well as the amount of funding eligible and stacking rules. So we would bring that back for the committee's consideration, but absolutely it doesn't stop us for any project to look for other sources of funding. We don't just assume that whatever's there is what we want to do. We scan weekly.
Thank you very much. Good to hear. Director Bax.
So looking at the way that this is going to be paid for, it doesn't seem to have an impact on our taxation base, which is a little bit of silver lining, so that's good. But I imagine that we've sent letters of protest to Transport Canada and whoever else, and we can't. Should we make a motion to send another one? Should we just keep squeaking that wheel? I don't know. Is there any way to let the people who have put us in this situation know that we're not happy?
I think I'm going to refer that question to the Islands Trust representative.
It's ongoing, and I think once we have our plan together as to what these docks mean as a whole, what our priorities are, absolutely we have to move forward on how we can get better support from the province. I'm also looking at other options for the docks we don't own, and how BC Ferries participates in that. There are angles, none of them look promising, but by all means, if there's a specific place that the regional district can play in how we support these transportation infrastructure pieces better, I'm all for it, and I think we should do that, but part of our plan as a strategic approach on all our docks.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, this is a question for all of us, and I do believe that we have one tentative advocacy piece going to UBCM. So we just want to make sure that's worded correctly, and we can use this as an example of we need more money, and we need senior government support for this kind of stuff. It's clearly part of the transportation system. It's not something regional districts have taken on. We don't do roads. This is a marine road, and it should be funded appropriately by the senior government, in my opinion. And we're going to tell the government that again this summer.
Director Lee, I'm going to ask you to perhaps make a motion after this item is dealt with for a UBCM motion, or to ask staff to look into this, because I believe this has been the subject of UBCM resolutions before, but never hurts to investigate further, and perhaps through the lens of climate change. But we do have a motion on the floor, and I'm not seeing any further hands, so I guess I have to call the question. So, all in favor? All opposed? Would I like that recorded? Yes, I would like that recorded. So, that passes. So, Director Lee, did you want to make a motion regarding a UBCM resolution, or would you like to leave that?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I was trying to remember whether we had already put that forward as a advocacy piece. If we haven't, I'd be pleased to make a motion that we ensure that we request a ministers' meeting to discuss this issue at UBCM.
Oh, okay, sure. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Okay. Probably, but we can refer it to staff. Thank you very much. I think we have reached the end of the agenda. I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? We are adjourned, and now we have the public question period. And if anybody has questions and they would like to come up to the mic, so, because otherwise the people in our studio audience cannot hear, and one of our attendees has a hand up as well. So, I'm going to go first to the studio audience. Mr. John Waters, sorry. Mr. Waters, are you able to address the group? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Your audio is really poor. I think we're going to... Okay, thank you for the musical interlude. Anybody in the room? Question? Sure, come on up to the mic.
Is there a point? I guess really, you guys have already adjourned, you're proposing. Is there any additional information you could use? I don't want to waste everyone's time.
Really, it will be going to the board, as mentioned earlier, so anything
Yeah.
share with the directors only can help.
Off the cuff.
Sure.
Oh, the one that actually has a person speaking with the Doppler. Yeah. I'm the POMO rep for Hopkins Landing. Kate and I have spoken a few times. I'm just spitballing here. Off the cuff, I understand you have your safety issues you have to deal with clearly. These are all points that the community has probably made ad nauseum. What I think might be overlooked, and I think might be of consideration, is as much as kids love jumping off the wharf, and we don't want to kind of acknowledge that this is important. You guys don't have the money for this, clearly. You've probably got 9 more ports coming you need to deal with. The question is in terms of our marine heritage, what do we want this town to look like 100 years from now? Do we want to ultimately, Donna, abandon all the wharfs? Like, because really that is the question you probably have at hand. Do we? You know, I would argue, no, we don't actually. From a marine heritage standpoint, Not alone, but certainly with a specific acknowledgement to that. What do we want this place to look like 100 years from now? Do we just want it to be the best water infrastructure in the world? Is this where we're going? I mean, I know raising taxes isn't probably the best. Hopefully, grant money is an option. But I think it's worth spending money on all 9 ports. I made this point to the, Kate, what is Bruce? Which one is he? Gambier Harbor? Yeah. I made the point to the POMO rep for Gambier Harbor, saying that this Hopkins situation is about to be a model for all the other 9 ports or the other 8 ports. They're all either going to be dismantled, which is somewhat a little bit of a feel I get from you, Donna. I'm not sure. Like we don't have the cash for this, so we're not going to do this. Or do we go to the public and say, what do you want this place to look like? Do you want it to acknowledge our marine heritage? Do you want to have amenities where, as my wife pointed out in a letter to Kate, everyone who can't access waterfront, like the wealthy, who doesn't live on the waterfront, can enjoy the pier experience? You know, whether that's tourists, fishermen, kids, families, people don't have the income to access the waterfront outside of a banal beach experience. Not to say that a beach experience is banal, but it's something special to be able to go out to the end of a wharf. Certainly White Rock acknowledged it. Certainly any neighborhood with a pier acknowledges that this is important. I'm focusing on this one aspect, knowing that, of course, safety, accessibility, medical emergencies, you're going to hear that up, down, and the other. It's just, it shouldn't be discounted. The experience we have living on the Sunshine Coast, being what we are, being who we are. It'd be like Peggy's Cove saying, you know what, we don't really need to have a lighthouse. I mean, it costs money, it's taxpayer money. It's part of who we are. So I hope that you take into account, outside of all the expenses, find the money, you know. And find the money means the unpopular, probably grants or raise taxes. I mean, clearly that's what's at hand. I don't think any of you do this for the job. You do it because you're committed volunteers and you like helping out your community. I don't think you're worried about getting reelected. It's an unpopular decision to raise taxes, but it might be something that we have to look at to maintain what we have. So if you can't get the money from community services, if you can't get the money from grants, gas money, whatever, raise taxes. Make it worth it. And I think in a casual, non-scientific study, canvassing over the past weekend of probably almost 1,000 people via Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, I got one dissenting person that thought this wasn't worth spending tax money on. I know that's not scientific. So I would be happy to start a petition and to ask those difficult questions. Do you find this worth making it one of the petition points? Is it worth actually raising taxes to be committed not just to this port, but to all 9 ultimately, in recognition of what it means as a community, as a culture, to have these things, you know? And I think that's just spitballing. Sorry, just blah, blah, blah. But anyway, hopefully you change your mind, Donna, in particular. Thanks.
And since that wasn't a question, this isn't an answer.
It was more of a...
But we do have to take the social equity part into consideration. We're facing large tax increases for critical services like water and for the landfill. We have no choice. And people are coming to us wanting us to spend more tax money, but the people who are not in this room right now are the people who live in my mobile home and RV parks, who are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, who are not getting enough money from their pension to meet rising costs, or families who are mortgaged to the hilt, who are awake at night, worried what's going to happen if they have to renew their mortgage at a higher interest rate. And those people are crunched, and they're leaving our community because they can't afford to live here anymore. And we've got to take those people into consideration too. And the ports, frankly, are not important to them. So it's a hard choice, because the people who come to our meetings, they want more. They want more ice time. They want a new community hall. They want all kinds of great amenities that lots of people want, but we are crunched for money. We are going to be going deeply in debt to pay for critical infrastructure over the next few years. And somehow we've got to figure out how to say no, because what previous boards have done is always said yes, because it's a lot easier to say yes. It really is. because the folks that come to us generally are educated, polite, well-researched, articulate, nice people, and they want what they want. And the people who can't afford it, like I said, are not in the room. Just saying. Do we want to say any more, or are we done for the day? Oh, Chair Lee wants to say something. And then I'm calling Director Lee first, and then Director Back.
Thank you. The speaker reminded me of my childhood, sitting on the end of the dock at Irvin's Landing with the steamship coming in. I'm a little older than most people here, but and that's probably what your dock was for originally too. And coming to work today, I was discussing that with Director Gabius, and that is, how do we keep those heritage structures in place? Because a lot of us want it. Unfortunately, I don't believe we can do it through taxation. We have to do it through community getting together and making it happen. It's their heritage. It's outside of making everybody pay. Hopefully you can find some people that are willing to donate. I note that is what happened in Davis Bay. That is what happened down in White Rock. That is what's happening in Pender Harbor. There is ways, and I agree with you. But whether it's, as Director McMahon was pointing out, is that a taxpayer's job, or is that the community to get together and fund that outside of the service level stuff that we're responsible to do and ensure is affordable? So it's a dilemma. It's a real dilemma. But anyways, I wanted to say I hear you and thinking about the same things.
Director Bax.
Yeah, it is a dilemma. It's and as far as I'm concerned, I consider this, as many of the people on the coast do, this is a critical piece of infrastructure. Now, that was put into our hands, I think. The downsizing of the other levels of government have downloaded stuff onto us that shouldn't have come to us in the first place. This should be a Transport Canada thing, but we're living in that reality now, and all the best we can do is advocate for it. My biggest regret for today is the time it's going to take, that we didn't get ahead of this. And I know that the decision that we made today is not going to be understood by everyone, and we're going to get a lot of blowback from parts of the community. They're going to blame us, but our hands are tied. The news release is out already. I'm reading it now. It's on our website that the dock has been closed temporarily for repair, and I'm hoping that staff and the powers that be can understand that that the time is of the essence in order to try to mitigate the effect on the community. And as far as docks are concerned, I'm still jumping off the Davis Bay dock with my son every summer. It's great.
Okay. All right. Come on up with another question.
Okay.
My glasses.
I'm Joe Wright. I'm on the Ports Committee as well, representing partly Gambier Harbor and also West Bay Dock. I'd like to just make a couple of comments. I won't repeat everything that's been through the discussion because there's been some good points made already, but I would like to emphasize that Director Stanford's summary paragraph really did cover the issues quite well, and recommend to the board that that be paid serious attention to. I fully support, and as an opinion, at least on the Ports Committee, the need for prioritization of the 9 docks that we already have and potentially 10, because I would argue that there are, and again, in my opinion, several that are far less important than the one at Hopkins Landing. So, Chair, your question was a good one, and bears some urgency, I think, to consider, because we can do some prioritization, and that's probably a good thing to do. But the support for the Hopkins dock ties to the medical emergencies, the ability for Gambier and Keats residents to go and pick up fuel, propane, lumber supplies. All of that ties into the Gibsons and Sechelt communities quite tightly, because we spend a lot of money from the islands in Sechelt and Gibsons, and this is part of the infrastructure that allows us to do it. And without the port being available, it's going to be very inconvenient for the next 6-8 months or a year, whatever it takes. There are ways around some of the things, but I use it a lot, and many of my friends and colleagues on Gambier and Keats also use it a lot. So I really say this is a critical piece of the infrastructure, and I do strongly support the need to go probably after the transportation system from the province at least. I think that's a very, very good point, and ties to the fact that we don't do bridges and roads either. And the point is well made, and a good one for consideration. But just to support from the Gambier community, at least, and Keats as well, this is a critical piece of our infrastructure for communications, transportation, and safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've hit, have we hit the end? Director Lee, is your hand still up or up again? Okay, we're done. I think we can wrap the party. Thank you very much, everybody.